On today's show, we will name 3 players each that the Mavericks should trade for. We talked all yesterday about how the Mavericks probably won't make a trade, but here are 3 players each the Mavs could make a deal for, and it's pretty possible.
And why the dunk contest is the taco bueno of All-Star Weekend.
As long as DJ Khaled's not there. On today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can subscribe to the show, getting closer to 10,000 subscribers. Thanks to everybody that comments every day, answers the questions. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks.com. Use that promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. And joining me, as always, my co-host, contributor, writer at Mavs.com, the trade tycoon, the One More Thing King. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
Rising Stars rosters dropped today. One, shout out. You said everybody comments on the YouTube. Shout out to the guy who said, I literally disagree with everything that Isaac Harris says. So here you go.
It's my burner. It's my burner.
This comment is for you. Luka is good at basketball. Ha! You can't say that
Got
anymore,
him.
bro.
Got him.
Got you.
Got him.
Okay. The Rising Stars rosters were dropped. And
Did Luka make it?
Luka did not. Ben Simmons was a snub.
Ben Simmons
And-
still there?
Josh Green didn't make it. Any initial thoughts?
Today Isaac texted me and said, I got a podcast for tonight. Why Josh Green was snubbed for why Josh Green should have made the Rising Stars. And I was like, oh, he's coming in hot with this. Like I thought you had some kind of angle, and he was totally joking with me, and I totally took it. And
you literally wrote back and was like, ooh, interesting segment. I was like,
I thought you had an angle.
I will say this. I do find it when I look at these rosters, I'm not gonna get upset about them, whatever. They're fun. It's however you feel about the game. I do think it's a huge advantage for the G League Ignite team. Holy crap.
Yeah, that's cool for them.
That's a plug for them. That's really cool. But I think it's really interesting to look back at like the sophomore class. I tweeted this out today. It's like, all right, it's your second year in. Of these 12 guys that made this roster, where did you get drafted? Because you kind of look at the draft and stuff and like,
yeah,
okay. And you look at these guys, like how many of these guys were drafted 15 on? Cole Anthony, Isaiah Stewart, Sadiq Bey, Precious, Maxey, Jay McDaniels, Bane, Jayshawn Tate was an undrafted guy a year before that. Like that's most of the roster. There's only 3 guys on the team. So 9 out of 12 players, actually 8 out of 12 players. Because then you have Halliburton, Okoro, Ball, and Edwards. 8 out of 12 players were drafted 15 on. They're in this right
outside of the lottery.
Outside of the lottery. And I get it. There's injuries that play into this, like some, whatever. But still, I just think and it doesn't tell all, but it's just interesting to look at it and be like, dang, it's kind of cool.
Mavs have a pick this year. Could they get a player like that?
I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible to do that kind of thing. All right, let's get into our topic today. We'll do 3 players each the Mavs should target in a trade, because yesterday we talked all about how Mavs will probably stand pat with Dorian and Brunson and not make a huge move, but there are some moves the Mavs can make. So I'm gonna start with my first one. Can the Mavs find somebody? Do the Mavs get desperate and say, all right, we love Tim Hardaway Jr., but can we get somebody that can contribute right now, and that we don't have to just sit around and wait for, all right, is he going to be available for the playoffs or not? Can we find somebody like that? And I think they may be able to find somebody like that in Houston with Eric Gordon. Can you just do Eric Gordon for Tim Hardaway Jr. straight up, or with second or whatever you need on the Rockets side to get this done?
It's really interesting because obviously Eric Gordon is a big name, in the trade market right now, because I think everybody could use him and he would fit with everybody. Like Cleveland, he would be great in Cleveland. Like do the Rubio picks with him, all of that. You look at it just as fit in Dallas and you say, what does Dallas need right now? Man, we need a scoring punch off the bench who's like a Tim Hardaway type, whether it's a point guard, a wing, whoever,
Shooter.
who can get buckets. Yeah, and who can be a shooter, who could play with Luka and stuff too. Eric Gordon, would do that. I think he's shooting 42% from three this season.
And he holds his own defensively. He's not like a lockdown defender, but he's stocky and he'll hold his own.
Yeah, so like you look at his contract, he makes 18.2 this year. Next year, 19.5. And then he has this non-guaranteed team option. It's actually a team option in 2023 for 20.9. So basically you get one more year locked in at 19.5. I think if you're Houston, you're probably needing more if you're saying, because you're basically adding 3 more years on top of that to swap, Hardaway for Eric Gordon.
Good luck to Houston to find somebody else that can take that money, right? I mean, trading $18 million is not as easy as it. I mean, maybe they do it with the Raptors for Dragic and then buy him out. They do something like that.
The Rubio deal's sitting there for him.
Something like that.
I mean, the Joe Ingles contract is sitting there kind of for him. If Utah wanted to go that route, I mean, these guys are expiring contracts that, you could get something back and get off that money for Eric Gordon next year, but he can fit with anybody. And yes, if you're offsetting the money that way, I'm more open towards it. But if there's a scenario to where you're saying, all right, we're going to piece together Dwight, another guy, whatever. And now we're looking at Eric Gordon at 19, Tim Hardaway at 19, Porzingis at 30, like all these guys paying that makes me very, very weary on that. But
wary.
He would. Wary. There you go.
Would you be weary? I guess it would make you weary.
It really would make me weary. But
all right, give me one of your players.
I've mentioned this guy before. He's not been talked about a lot as far as trade rumors. Really not at all, because this team is still kind of in the playoff hunt. The Clippers are 8th right now in the West, and there's, you hear different things. Is Paul George coming back? Is he not? And
him and Kawhi about coming back.
Yeah, and it's like, at what point do they just throw in the towel and say, this is our Warriors type season. Let's take the year. Kawhi's already out. Paul George set this thing out, and let's just try to go to the bottom and sell off some of these pieces.
The problem is they don't have any picks to go to the bottom 4, but to sell the pieces is your point.
Yeah, but could you sell some of the pieces? I mean, they have Reggie Jackson. If, Marcus Morris, somebody take that contract, but a guy on their team makes super cheap money. He'd be a perfect fit in Dallas. Nick Batum. Love this guy. Oof, I think he would be great in Dallas. He makes $3 million. He's 33. You start looking across. I mean, he's shooting 42% from 3 this season. He started 27 games for him. He could start for Dallas. He could come off the bench for Dallas. He could pass.
We saw that block he made against Slovenia in the Olympics.
Yeah,
and that was
he gave Brunson.
I will not forget that block very often.
He gave Brunson, trouble in the playoffs with his length, defending him. Super smart, a vet. He's the type of guy at the cheap contract. If they start to go, I mean, everybody would go after him, but I'm like, go get Nick Batum. I would love that. That would be if they could walk out of the next like 3 or 4 weeks and add Nick Batum and Goran Dragic to this team, if they're not going to make any like bigger trades, that would be a big win for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. That would be a massive win. It's hard for me to see how or why the Clippers would do this, but he does have, that player option for $3.3 million next year. Nick Batum does. Mm-hmm. Maybe he turns that down and tries to get more money somewhere else. And the Mavs come in and say, hey, we'll take him. If you can't just use him for this year or whatever. But another player kind of like that for me is Kemba. Like if you're not going to get, if the Dragic thing is not going to happen, just do the traded player exception for Kemba, right? You're taking a flyer on him. You're not bringing him in to be the 30 minutes a game Kemba. You're coming in for him to be, all right, you back up Brunson, you back up Luka. Can you come in and give us 20 minutes? Can you give us 15 minutes, right? Can you give us 15 minutes in the playoffs? That's one I would shoot for. That's another player that I have my eye on for sure.
And they have the connections, right? We've went over this, Bill Duffy, the whole Boston thing that doesn't get talked about enough. How, how close that, that was to happening of Kemba being in Dallas, and then the Horford thing, and he ended up going to Boston. Kemba goes to Boston, and all of that. The rest is history. But there's the connections there. The agent connection's there.
Yeah.
The spot is there too, right? I mean, you laid it out. If they don't get Dragic, that he would fill that same type of role for Dallas of, hey, we don't need you to play 32 minutes a night.
No.
Can you give us 20 minutes? Can you come off the bench, be a spark plug, do what you've done in New York, a handful of times, and do that? Like, I mean, heck yeah, Kemba off the bench with Reggie Bullock and Maxey, and like, sign me up.
Sign me up. I knew.
Do you have the number? It's on the books for him for next year, though. I know he has one more guarantee.
It's like 9 million, something like that. I can grab it.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm down for that amount of money.
Way to fill the time
cool.
there. Yeah, 9.9.
Yeah. I'm down. Cool.
Really, really good stalling vamping for me. He makes 8.7 this year, which fits into the traded player exception, which is 10.8 for the Mavericks. And then next year he makes 9.1. So you would have to still keep him on the books for next year as well. But he's expiring at that point. So then there's some options. The Mavs could be one of these teams where you can trade Kemba as an expiring for the Eric Gordon type player that is out there. So there's some options with that. But yeah, I think Kemba is definitely one of my players. Coming up, I got a couple more. Now I got 2 on the same team, and then I got a wild card sort of a player that I'm just looking at. I'm saying if they want to just do something big, do this. Talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over/under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times the money that you put down. You can go ahead and do this for the NBA. You can do it for the Super Bowl. You can go and put Prize Picks money down on so many different things, so many different categories, and not just the stars, but the bench players as well. Right now, the ones that they have available for the NFL for passing yards. Here's my boy, Joe Burrow, 265 passing yards in the Super Bowl. Whew, that one's a tough one. Stafford, 272.5 passing yards in the Super Bowl. I'm going to go over for Burrow and under for Stafford. If I put down $20, I can win 45 on that one. If I hit the power play button, I put down $20, I can win $80. So go check it out. Prize Picks. Use the promo code NBA, and you'll get $50 free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point. So go check it out. Exclusive offer on prizepicks.com. Promo code NBA. Also, it's complicated to try and figure out all these trades. It's complicated to try and figure out how it's going to work for the Mavericks to get one of these guys without giving up Dorian and Brunson. But you know what is not complicated? It's doing your taxes if you have TurboTax Live experts. You think unusual circumstances mean complicated taxes, but for TurboTax Live experts, that's what makes things interesting. We all have unique lives. We've invested in different things over the last couple of years. We've done jobs outside of the norm. TurboTax experts they can answer all your tax questions, walk you through the entire process, or do your taxes for you from start to finish. They help you get every deduction you deserve, no matter your unique situation. So go check it out. Go to turbotax.com. You can go and check out their TurboTax Live experts, and they can go ahead and do your taxes from start to finish. Do your thing. They've got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live. All right, Isaac Harris. Let's get into a couple more players. Here's one of mine. Do you have another one? You want to go first?
No, you got it.
Here's one of mine.
I mean, I have 2 more. But...
He doesn't fit in the traded player exception, which stinks. This would be a perfect player for this. But Terence Ross from the Orlando Magic. Like, the Orlando Magic have 2 guys that are just sitting there and no one's talking about them, but they've got to be available, right? They've got to be on the block. And Terence Ross and Gary Harris. I think they would be great ads for the Mavericks. Gary Harris could come in, and he's a really good defensive player. He's been on good teams with the Nuggets. He's been in the playoffs before. He's shooting the ball well this year. Could he come in and replace what Tim brought, and then also be an upgrade defensively? For sure. He'd be a downgrade offensively, but a definite upgrade defensively, and add to what the Mavericks are building right now. Terence Ross, he's a guy that can fill it up, come off the bench, be that spark plug off the bench, and replace the scoring that Tim Hardaway Jr. left. Now, to get these guys, it's kind of hard. You can do Hardaway, Burke, Sterling Brown, and Moses for both. Throw in a couple seconds, and then throw all those guys at them, and you can get both that way. If they wanted to do the Tim Hardaway thing, Tim Hardaway signed for a couple more years. They want a vet on their team that's going to be there. I think Gary Harris and Terence Ross are both They're going to be expiring next year, so they're not signed long term. So if the Magic want a player that's going to be around for a little while, a little bit of a culture builder for them. Actually, Gary Harris is an unrestricted free agent this offseason, and then Terence Ross has one more year on his contract. But what do you think about those two guys from the Magic?
I like Gary Harris more than Ross, mainly because of contract and a little bit better shooting. Ross, on the books there for that 11.5 for next season.
11.5 is very tradable, though. I started looking through some of these deals, and I'm like, man, should they send Powell? Should they send Maxey? They just have those deals in that range.
Yeah, very tradable. I think when I look at Gary Harris, I look at it and say, all right, you're a $20 million expiring contract. If you can make the money work, and how Dallas is set up, it's not like they have a ton of like expirings either. So if they did trade for Gary Harris, that means they'd be opening up some cap space because they'd have to include a player who's on the books already for next season. And Gary Harris, I don't have this in front. I think he shoots like 37% from three this year, maybe 38.
He's shooting a lot better this year than he has in the past. But
Terence Ross is at 31.
37 for Gary Harris.
I did look up Ross. He shot like 33% from three last year. So he isn't the best 3-point shooter. Gary Harris, I think I would prefer over the two. Yeah, because I think Gary Harris could play some minutes and stuff with Luka, and but it'd be harder to get to that money number, for Harris.
Yeah, you'd most likely have to do Tim Hardaway, right? Unless you cobble together Dwight plus a couple other things, that's just the way you get to that money. But those are my two guys from the Magic. You have anybody else?
Throwback to the Gary Harris Rodney Hood debate.
Did we both lose that one?
We used to do, so back to the OG days of Locked On Mavs, we used to do like in the off season, we'd rank
when the Mavs were bad.
The Mavs were bad, yes. We would rank every position, the starters for every position. So we just do like 1 to 30 shooting guards and all of that. And that, had some fun debates too.
We had Gary Harris and Rodney Hood at very different spots on our list. And
I was pro Gary Harris. You were pro Rodney Hood. That was when Harris was in Denver and Rodney Hood was maybe Utah, possibly. But
it's going somewhere, yeah.
Okay. This guy, I've tried to get on the Mavs before. Mavs fans.
You said I've tried to get him on the Mavs before.
Seriously.
I've emailed Cuban repeatedly about this guy.
Mark, we need this guy.
I've always been on the podcast just for that.
I've always been a fan of him. When I've mentioned this before, Mavs fans have been like, "No, we don't need him." All this. Montrezl Harrell. I love this guy.
No, we don't need him.
I love the energy he brings. I think Washington is in. Gosh, I don't even know what the crap they do over the next week and a half.
They could do anything.
They're struggling, and he's on a $9.2 million expiring contract. So no money past this year. You look at he averages 7, comes off the bench. He's obviously been coming off the bench for a while. He's kind of having a resurgent year this year compared to his LA year there. But scoring 14 points off the bench, shooting 65% from the field, 7 boards. Like if we're looking at, I know he doesn't fit the, hey, who's a spark plug, like guard creator type of guy. But if you just want to expand the box to, we need offense off the bench. I think Montrezl Harrell could give you offense and give you buckets off the bench. Now, how you want to look at it and say, does he fit with Maxey? All of that. I just think I love Marquise Chris, but put him into that like Marquise Chris role off the bench, give him a little bit more minutes. He would at least give us a little bit of offense, some toughness, a little bit more rebounding. I know all the history and stuff with Luka and all that stuff, but the
history with Luka notwithstanding, Montrezl Harrell is doing what Montrezl Harrell always does, right? He is a regular season player that will eventually, the novelty of him will wear off, right? And the usability.
But you're not trading for him to be a starter, though. Give me 20 minutes a night.
The Wizards aren't using him as a starter right now, and it just eventually stops working. You're so reliant on hustle stuff. If the hustle wanes at all, he just becomes kind of unplayable. And so it's just a weird. It's just he's a very, and you can't use him in the playoffs really. The Clippers like the Clippers had that team, and they went 1 year with Montrezl Harrell, and we're like, no, we're done. Get out of here. We cannot rely on you. He was he was up there for 6th man of the year, him and Lou Williams. And they were just like, we can't. Like, you just literally cannot play you in a playoff series.
I wonder how Kid feels about him. that he coached him last year.
It's probably why they're not going to trade for him.
I know. I don't know. I just always liked him.
Montrezl Harrell did not have a really good year in
he
the Lakers either. But he's doing the same. He did the same thing he's doing now with the Wizards. Like he comes on real strong, and comes on real strong, and you're feeling really good about him, and then all of a sudden it starts waning a little bit, and the effort goes, and you're like, okay, now what do we do?
All right, whatever.
Sorry. Speaking of when the effort goes, my other guy for the traded player exception, Dennis Schroeder. I mean, take the risk. Mavs, take the risk for Dennis Schroeder.
If it's the last moment at the buzzer and you don't have anything and you have the TPE,
last one out the bar,
like take it, like take throw a second and say Schroeder come. I think he's averaging like 14, 15 points off the bench for Boston. So I would do it. I mean, unless they're personality stuff and all that. But
my last wild card I'll throw out here quickly.
I have one more too, but
Porzingis for Cj Mccollum.
Oh, we're about to go to a break, and you're just going to throw that out there.
Just do it. Just
coming up after the break. We're going to talk about.
Just do it. We'll talk about that. We'll break down that deal and Isaac's one more coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Built Bar. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're absolutely delicious, and I do eat them. I got one right in front of me. The coconut brownie chunk, and it's got a chocolate smudge on it because I ate another Built Bar and I put this on top of the wrapper from the other Built Bar. If you guys want to know proof that I actually eat these, they're great. They're delicious. Some people put them in the fridge. I like to keep them out and like the chocolate to melt a little bit. Put them out in the Texas heat for just a little bit. It's 70 on Tuesday, and we're expecting snow on Wednesday, so I don't know what's going on in Texas, but you can eat Built Bars in either environment, a 70-degree day or a 20-degree day. Right now, they also have new flavors always coming out. White chocolate cookies and cream.
Ooh,
white chocolate on the outside, cookies and cream. Looks to be a little more cookies than cream in the middle. But you can go check that bar out right now. Go check it out, built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your entire order. I bought 2 boxes myself the other day, and I got 15% off the entire order using the promo code LOCKED15. So you can get that too. Go ahead, check it out, built.com, promo code LOCKED15. All right, Isaac Harris, let's get into, okay, we got a couple more trades to talk about, and then maybe we'll get into our game at the end.
Maybe.
I think we may not. Kristaps Porzingis for Cj McCollum. I've listened to Mike Richmond on the Locked On Blazers podcast, and if I hadn't listened to him, I wouldn't think that this deal would be possible. But he is so down on what Cj McCollum brings, and it seems like this is a team, the Blazers, that need to make some kind of move. They need to blow it up because the team that they kind of built, the Dame, CJ, Robert Covington, Nurkic, like that crew with Powell, Norman Powell coming off the bench, Anthony Simons being young and interesting, Larry Nance now they brought in. They just cannot keep those guys on the floor. They cannot do that. And so now they've come to a point where like the fans are asking to tank. The Damian Lillard's out. The team is just in shambles. It's a team that needs to it needs a new direction. I think it needs to go Glee and go full Mr. Schuster new directions. And Cj McCollum and Kristaps Porzingis could be that new direction for both teams. And for the Mavericks, it's definitely a step backwards defensively. It takes away from some of the things that the Mavericks have been able to do this year, because if you bring in Cj McCollum, that's not a positive defender, and you're also taking away one of your few rim protectors on the team. I get that. But it's taking maybe a little step back defensively to go forward even more so than they had before offensively and consistency-wise. You know, Cj McCollum's usually playing. He's not really injury prone. And so I think the Mavericks should consider a deal like that if the Blazers would.
It achieves what you're wanting to achieve from your angle there of if both teams want to just go a different direction with how they're rolling their lineups, because all of a sudden now you have a pick and pop, like what they kind of wanted to do with throwback Myers Leonard in Portland is to have this big that, I mean, and actually, it worked for a little bit, like the pick and pop with Dame, a center that could pick and pop with Dame. And
Myers was 50, 40, 90, like 50% from the field, 40% from 3, 90% from the free throw line one year with them.
Yeah. So like that could be, if they wanted to shake it up around Dame and say, let's go a different route. Let's make the number 2 guy next to you a shooting big and all of that. Then I get it from that angle. I think from Dallas's angle, looking at it, if they entertain that, then what happens with Brunson? Because now you're paying CJ McCollum $30 million a year to be, the guy, which I think he would fit great next to Luka. But then are you going to pay, JB 20 to come off the bench? Because I don't think you can play Brunson, CJ, and Luka together. I could be wrong, but I don't know how I feel about Brunson and CJ together as a starting unit.
No, I don't think so. I don't think you can play both of them together. And I think some nights you have to make that choice, which one you can play.
And then you have to ask yourself, does Brunson want to stay in Dallas if he's going to come off the bench whenever he knows he can be a starter elsewhere?
If the team is better and they're going to win, it sounds like he does want to stay, but we can't really speak for him.
That's the thing. I would wonder if they entertain something like that. But I love CJ. I love CJ's game. I don't think the latest stretch by him defines like who he is. I think we've seen him at a higher level than what he's at right now.
You think these 5 games don't define his season?
He did have a collapsed lung this year, so
I said he's not super injury prone. He played 80 games 3 years in a row, then played 70 the 2 years when they did, the season they didn't have as many games. He played 47 games last year and then 33 so far this year. I mean, he's had some injuries last 2 years, but before that he was playing really well. 20 points per game always. He can get to the basket. He's not necessarily the distributor that that you would maybe want in a secondary creator, but he can be. He can dish it out, and he can definitely shoot buckets. He can get buckets. He's incredible in the mid range, which adds. Can you imagine Luka, Brunson, and Cj Mccollum all like on shooting the mid range? The Mavs mid range would just be a big green like blob,
just fighting for mid range shots. Speaking of get buckets, I get my last name. So we're supposed to come up with 3 names. I came up with 3. Nick came out with like 13 here. So
two of them counted as I did a 2-for-1 with the Magic guys.
I got somebody that I really dug deep into the league. I'm like, all right, I want to find somebody that no one's talking about trade rumors. No one's connected to the Mavs at all. It's like, all right, I could see some type of lane that would make sense a little bit. Malik Beasley in Minnesota. So he's having kind of a down year. He's been off and on. I just read this piece on him in the Star Tribune of, hey, the Wolves need the Malik Beasley who played versus the Suns and not against the Warriors. And it's like this whole piece about the kind of the Jekyll, Mr. Hyde of Beasley this season, up and down. He's only averaging 12 points this season. Last season, he's averaged 19.6. Last year, he shot 40% from 3. He's down to 34% this year. So he's not shooting the ball, the best this season. So he's just having this kind of like streaky down year. And then when you look at his contract, he makes 14.4 this year. So obviously it doesn't fit into the exception. Then the 15.5 next year, which still isn't like, super bad. And then he has the team option after that. He's a guy that you get, if you could get him and then bring him off the bench, I think that he could be an offensive guy, younger guy. What Minnesota would want for him, I don't know. I mean, they obviously have Cat and Ant and, D'Angelo Russell and
Jared Vanderbilt.
All that. So I don't know what it would be. Multiple pieces from Dallas. Would it be worth it? How does Dallas feel about him? He can just get buckets. I've seen him torch Dallas. I think it was last year that he torched Dallas, and that's just been etched into my brain of him just putting up buckets on him. And I just think him in like the Tim Hardaway role off the bench would actually work.
Yeah, he had a 30-point game, 30 points, 9 boards, 6 assists in a Mavericks win, but crazy game for him.
Anyway,
that's an interesting name. The problem with any of these guys, unless you're sending Tim Hardaway Jr. out when he comes back, which he is probably going to come back at the end of the season or in the playoffs, that you're just very redundant at that point. If you're building
but like you look at Minnesota and let's just say, like, I feel like some people tried to get them like Miles Turner or another center out there to play alongside like Cat. And it's like, once again, like you said, Dallas has these contracts depending on how bad they want to get him. Like Maxey makes 8, Dwight Powell makes, 10 or 11. Now you're just looking at, throwing one, somebody and then another contract together and you're right around that 14 number. So for a 14, for like a 10 to 15 number, you wouldn't necessarily have to have Tim. It's just once you get into that like 17, 16 and above, you're pretty much just working with Tim's contract for the most part. Yeah, it just depends. But
throw out that last name we were talking about before we hit record.
What was the last name?
The Knicks guy.
The Knicks guy?
Burks.
Oh, Alec Burks. I think Alec Burks would fit great on this team. Just looking at his contract and stuff. I mean, who reported? I think it was Windhorst said that New York was looking at trying to clear up a rotation spot for Cam Reddish. They were looking around the league at spots for Kemba, Alec Burks, somebody like that. So I don't have his stats in front of me. I just know that if you put him into the Tim Hardaway role off the bench for Dallas, I think he could. I could be wrong on this, but I think he would fit into that traded player exception that Dallas has. He's just 30. He's averaging 11 points this season, 40% 3-point shooter. So
he's making $9.5 million this year, and he's bounced around a little bit, but he found a little spot with the Knicks, and he was with the Jazz for a long time, for the first 8 seasons of his career.
Yeah, so I mean he's a 6'6" wing basically. So you just kind of like take the Tim Hardaway role, and it's like, hey, you're not gonna just jack it up like Tim did, but come in and kind of be that wing off the bench. He would be like a better version of Sterling Brown, I think.
He's more creation off the dribble though than both Tim and Sterling. I don't even know if I would call him a wing. I would call him a guard, right? Like I would say that he's a guy you put the ball in his hands. He does a couple, like he would be a big upgrade on Burke Trey Burke in my opinion.
Yeah.
Burks. He's the plural of Trey Burke.
Like if you're 3 guys, we're kind of operating with some of these guys of, hey, they're not going to touch the starting unit for, let's just say that. So when you look at the Reggie, Maxey, whoever it is coming off the bench, like could he be one of those 2 to 3 guys coming off the bench in a playoff series? I think Alec Burks could, and he'd fit well in Dallas. My brain was just processing the fact, like we talked about that Cj Mccollum trade potential, and that Brunson would be a roadblock for a Cj Mccollum type trade is fascinating to me about what Brunson's season has meant. That he could be I think last year we would have said, what about Cj Mccollum, that trade, like, oh yeah, heck yeah, do that deal, blah, blah, blah. Brunson wouldn't factor into that at all. But the way he's played this year now all of a sudden makes that a question. I just find that fascinating. It shows his impact, like once again, how he's come on this year. And it just shows you how things change so much in a year. You look at CJ's value too.
Way down.
Now, when you read this, you read the right article and the right legit reporting, it's like teams across the league really just viewing that contract so bad to where, like a year ago, a Porzingis for CJ thing, people would just laugh at it. Be like, okay, there's no way. But it could be something legit. Would somebody even consider it on that end? So that's the, Ben Simmons. I mean, was it a year ago? It's like, man, could they get Cj Mccollum for Ben Simmons? No, I don't even think Philly would even entertain it, right? Like,
yeah, it was wild. That's more of Philly's expectations of what they're gonna get. Ben Simmons.
Hey, we got a Ben Simmons update. Ramona.
Oh, did we? Did we get the one? Did we get the both sides are encouraged by the?
No, we didn't get exactly what we wanted, but it was just, I was like, once I saw Woj and them retweet, I'm like, whatever, I'm not reading this.
I'm out on all until the Shams, Woj, Stein, whoever tweets Ben Simmons has been traded. I'm out on all of Ben Simmons.
I will say this: I think they trade him.
I think eventually, but I don't think it's this.
I think it's before the deadline.
The thing is, though, they're tied for number 1 in the East right now. It's wild.
I think it's we're past our pod thing, but we were gonna do like these superlative teams of like, hey, who's the most surprising, whatever. I think one of the more surprising things that'll happen before the deadline is now the reverse. I think Ben Simmons actually does get traded. I think Philly looks at it and says,
we're so good.
We're so close, and we have been so good.
And
I think some people
so beat up.
Yeah, and it's like, why not? Like, let's go. And I still think they can get a really good deal for it. And I mean, yeah, I could be wrong. It's just like, do you really, really want to drag this on? Like, do you really want to?
The weird thing is that waste 1 year of Joel Embiid's career, it's already going to be limited by injuries, I think, right?
Like, you're going to get slammed if they get put out in the first round, maybe even the second round. And it's like Embiid putting up like 45 a game.
I mean, they got put out last year with Ben Simmons.
Yeah, and it's like no one is like really helping him, and then everybody's just gonna be slamming you and making fun of you and be like, yeah, you could have had help, but
you could have had Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield and all all that mess.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, that's OKC tonight in Dallas. Be safe if you're going to the game.
Yes.
Supposed to get some snow and ice and everything. So make sure you be safe out there.
Plan accordingly going to grocery stores. I went to one tonight and oh my gosh, I stopped at a Kroger near my house and I pulled in and there was no carts and there were no parking spots. And I drove around for 5 minutes. I finally found a parking spot. I got out. I looked around and tried to find a cart and I said, nope. And so I went to another Kroger where they had no carts. And I went inside. I had to grab 2 baskets instead and walk around like an idiot with looking like I was carrying something all the way back. Like, man, it was a mess and all the water was almost gone. And I mean, it's crazy for 2 days of 20-degree weather.
And then we'll be back in good on Saturday.
Yeah, and it'll be 60 again on Saturday. So there you go, guys. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.